Week 1. Pulling apart and examining built references in chapters 12 and 13 of the Architecture of the Well-Tempered Environment. Chapter 12. A Range of Methods. Defining an environment with light being the first. In the Las Vegas Strip, what defines the environment you are contained in is pure environmental power diverted through neon and fluorescent gases. Virtual volumes are created without the use of apparent structure, and the streetscape is understood not as a sequence of facades, but as a corridor bounded by the surrounding colors and illuminance levels. Vanham utilizes this example to illustrate how architects who are not confined to architectural canon explore the creation of an environment. It is a shift from forms assembled in light to light assembled in forms. Closely related is the drive-in movie theater, or in Vanham's words, a house that is not a house. In this context, mobile personal environments are arranged in a space purely denoted through light and sound. Here, the environmental creation is undertaken by the individual, and the architect must simply set up a space for them to exist in. And, of course, coordinate the traffic, optics, electronics, and other necessary systems. If this becomes the model, then the need for a permanent enclosure disappears. So what new affordances will that give to designers? The Atomic Energy Commission Pavilion takes a stab at that from a different direction. Its atypical form, size, durability, and nature as a true air-supported structure make it notable amongst the backdrop of mediocre experimental inflatables. The cushion of air which allows the building to exist relies solely upon a continuous application of environmental power to retain its characteristics of shelter. At 230 feet long and a maximum of 100 feet wide, the energy required to pressurize the entire structure at 49 millimeters of mercury is enormous. However, as a more subversive proposition which attempts a new form of environmental regulation through exploitation of a new technology, it is certainly commendable. In extreme cases, the well-tempered environment must protect us from certain death. The spacesuit and spacewalker's life support system are charged with ensuring the most drastic separation of internal from external environment. The super-technical and incomprehensible functionings of these systems are required for the instant responses necessary to keep the astronaut alive. Vanham's point here is that while an absolute necessity in space, such sophistication may not be necessary here on Earth. An example of that principle is St. George's School in Wallasey, England by Emsley Morgan. Like any good passive house, this building is insulated to hell and back and seeks to contain all interior activity as energy for the colder months. The main feature is a solar wall which through configuration of absorptive, reflective, and ventilatory panels can, with some intelligence and instruction, be used to fully regulate the interior environment of each classroom. The school was so well tailored to its environment that the backup systems were removed after remaining unused for 5 years. The vernacular terraced row house in Sydney, Australia is only partially designed with such intelligence. The street-facing facade is protected against steep suns by a projecting balcony, and against raking sun by projecting party walls. However, the rear of these buildings has received no attention whatsoever. On any street there are two sides, so half of the homes will inevitably have the most improper solar exposure imaginable. In conditions where the rear is the sunward-facing facade, the small walled-in yard becomes a kind of solar oven, amplifying the heat already entering the building from solar exposure. Vernacular can be misleading. Chapter 13. A Breath of Intelligence. The first reference in this chapter regards the usage of glass, a thin and conductive material, in inventive ways to regulate the environment. The 3-story curtain wall of dark glass in the Willis Faber Dumas offices by Foster & Partners is both aesthetic and functional. It delivers a beautiful reflection of the cityscape by day while also reflecting much of the incident solar radiation, and at night it glows with the soft business of interior activity. Since then, glazing technology has come a long way and is now capable of equaling the regulatory potential of solid walls. The Inmost Microprocessor Factory by Rogers & Partners is a radical application of the environmental guarantee principle pioneered by Willis Carrier. The design of the factory began with calculating the bulk of the equipment needed to service the known areas of lab space, then sizing a structural system capable of carrying this weight at an appropriate height, and finally laying out enclosure and support so that they didn't interfere with the lab volumes. The prevailingly mechanistic aesthetic of the firm at the time heightens the legibility of the diagram for this building, although the same principles could have easily resulted in a building more closely resembling the Royal Victoria Hospital. This legibility, however, can be key in ensuring performance. The seemingly Edwardian homes by Thatcher and Thompson are in fact laced with environmental control mechanisms which cannot be read just by looking at them. This can be seen as an aesthetic liberation from the solar style of building, but can also lead to eventual reductions in performance as the users do not understand the function of particular elements. The examples in these two chapters can generally be organized into two groups reflecting my understanding of Bannum's thesis here: power-dominated and structure-dominated approaches to environmental control, with the projects existing on the spectrum. The third and most important axis is knowledge of context, which reflects an intellectual, not mechanical, sophistication. More on this to come.